The bread was already there. Every morning of your life, every single one. You have woken up, every day you have been alive, into a world where the bread already existed. On a shelf, in a bag, in a basket by the door. You have never once had to wonder whether there would be any, because there has never been a morning when there wasn't. Somebody was awake. Not as a figure of speech. For most of the time there have been towns. The fact that there is bread in the morning has meant that one particular person did not go to bed. They started at midnight, or at 1, or at 2, alone, in the dark, in a hot room, in a cold town, while every other person for half a mile was unconscious. Nobody thanked them. Nobody has ever thanked them in any century, because nobody notices a thing that is simply always there. That is not a complaint. That is the actual shape of the job. The job is to be the reason nothing went wrong. Tonight, you are that person. You work in a small town in England, and the year is somewhere near 1390, though nobody here would put it that way. Ask anyone in this town what year it is, and they will have to think about it. They will tell you it is the week after Michaelmas, or the second Sunday in Lent, or the year the mill wheel broke. That is enough for them. It will be enough for you. The town has perhaps 400 people in it. It has a church with a squat grey tower. It has a market square that is mostly mud. It has a mill down at the bottom of the hill where the river runs, and it has one bakehouse. The bakehouse is where you work. It is not yours. It belongs to your master, who is upstairs asleep, and who is going to stay asleep for most of what follows. He is not unkind. He is 60 years old, and his shoulders are finished, and he has come to an arrangement with the world in which you do the night and he does the selling. It is a fair arrangement. You have the better half of it, though it will take you some years to understand that. And nothing is going to go wrong tonight. That is not a promise a story usually makes, and it is the one this one is making. Nobody arrives. Nothing catches. No one is in danger. No one is coming, and there is nothing hidden in the walls. Tonight is a working night, one of about 300 working nights in a year, and it will be very like the one before it, and very like the one after. That is not the setup for something. That is the whole thing. You will get up in the dark. You will build a fire, and then wait a long time for it to burn down. You will feed a pot of old dough. You will knead until your arms are warm. You will rake out the ashes, sweep the oven floor, and put bread into the heat, and then more bread, and then other people's bread. And at the end of it, the sun will come up, and the town will wake and eat what you made, and you will go to bed. 400 people are going to have breakfast because of the next few hours, and not one of them will think about it, and that is exactly how you would want it. If you like nights like this one, there are others on this channel. That is all I will say about that. Now, it is somewhere in the small hours. The exact time is not available to you, and it is not available to anybody. There is no clock in this town. There is a bell on the church, which is rung for the offices of the day, and it is rung by a man working from his own judgment and the position of the sun, and it drifts, and everyone knows it drifts, and it does not matter in the slightest. The town is dark in a way that is difficult to arrange now. There is no light in the street. There is no light in any window. Every household in the town has covered its fire for the night, banked the embers under ash so they will still be alive in the morning, and so that nothing will spark while everyone sleeps. A loose fire at night is how a town like this stops existing. So the fires go under, all of them, one after another as the evening ends, and the whole place goes down into the cold together. All of them except one. The bakehouse fire cannot go under because bread cannot be made any other way. The oven takes hours to get hot and hours to give the heat back, and the town wants bread in the morning, and so someone has to be awake in the middle of the night with the only open fire for half a mile. That someone is you. In a little while, you are going to wake up. Not yet. Right now you are still asleep on a straw mattress under a blanket of undyed wool that smells of the sheep it came from. Your feet are cold. Your feet are always cold. You have stopped noticing. Outside, the town is doing nothing at all. Let it do nothing for a while longer. You wake before anything wakes you. This is the first thing the work does to a person. After a season or two of it, the body stops needing to be called. Something in you counts the hours while you sleep, and at a certain point, it decides that the time has come, and you open your eyes in the dark with no idea how you knew. You lie still for a moment and listen. The room is not silent. Rooms are never silent. There is the sound of two other people breathing, slow and heavy, on the other side of the floor. There is a small settling noise from the timbers overhead, which is the house getting colder and shrinking very slightly, the way it does every night. There is wind, but only a little, moving along the outside of the wall without much interest. And underneath all of that there is nothing. No cart, no voice, no dog. The town is as quiet as it ever gets. You put a hand out from under the blanket, and the cold takes it immediately. There is a particular decision that has to be made at this moment every night, and it does not get easier. The blanket is warm. It is the only warm thing in the building. Everything beyond the edge of it is cold, and you have to cross that edge, and there is no way to do it slowly. So you do it quickly. You sit up. The straw underneath you shifts and crackles and gives off a dry smell like a barn in summer, which is exactly what it is. The mattress is a sack of it, and it gets emptied and refilled twice a year, and it is coming to the end of a filling now, so it is flatter than it should be, and you can feel the boards through it in one place near your hip. You have got used to sleeping around that place. You find your hose in the dark, because you left them where you always leave them, and you pull them on over feet that have gone stiff. Then the tunic, wool, heavy, still holding a little of yesterday in it. Then the belt. Then, last, the shoes, which are leather and shaped like your feet and nothing like the shoes anyone wears now, and which have gone hard overnight and will need 100 steps to soften. None of this takes long. There is very little to put on and no light to do it by, and no reason to be careful. You have dressed in this dark perhaps 1,000 times. The others do not stir. One of them is the master's son, who is 11 and who does the day, and the other is a journeyman like you, who is not on tonight. They will get up in a few hours, and they will find bread already made, and neither of them will think about it. And that is correct. Nobody is supposed to think about it. That is what makes the whole thing work. You go down. The stair is not really a stair. It is a ladder with ambitions, 7 rungs of worn oak set at a steep angle, and you go down it backwards without looking, one hand on the frame, feeling for each rung with the ball of your foot. The wood is smooth in the middle where a century of feet have been. Your feet know the sequence better than you do. If you stop to think about it, you would probably fall. At the bottom, the air changes. It is colder down here, but it is also different in another way. There is a smell. It is faint and it is very old, and it belongs to this room and no other room in the world. It is flour and yeast gone slightly sour, and wood smoke that has been going into these walls for longer than anyone alive can remember, and under all of it a mineral smell like a riverbed, which is the stone of the oven. Cold stone that has been hot 10,000 times. It never fully lets go of it. You stand in it for a second and breathe. This is your favorite part, and you would not be able to explain why. You have never said it to anyone. There is nobody to say it to. Then you go to the door and lift the latch and step out into the street. The cold outside is a different animal from the cold indoors. Indoors, the cold is still. Out here, it moves. It comes down the street with the small wind behind it, and it goes straight through the wool and finds the skin. And for about 10 seconds it is genuinely unpleasant, and then your body accepts the situation and you stop caring. You stand in the doorway and look at the town. There is nothing to see. That is not a figure of speech. There is very nearly nothing to see. The street is a paler line between 2 darker masses, and the masses are houses, and above them there is a sky which is either cloud or not cloud, depending on whether there are stars in it tonight. Tonight there are a few. Not many. Enough to put a faint grey on the thatch. No window is lit. Not one in the whole town. Every fire in every house is under its ash, glowing to itself in the dark where nobody can see it, waiting to be dug out and blown back to life at dawn. 400 people are asleep within 200 paces of where you are standing. You are the only person in the town who is upright. There is a feeling that comes with this, and it is not loneliness. It is closer to being trusted with something. All of these people have lain down and closed their eyes on the understanding that in the morning there will be bread, and none of them are going to wake up and check. And the reason they do not have to check is that you are standing in this doorway in the cold with your hands under your arms. Somewhere off to the left, a dog makes a sound in its sleep and stops. Down the hill, very faint, you can hear the river. You can only hear it at night. In the daytime, the town covers it completely, and then everyone goes to bed and the river comes back, and it turns out it has been there the whole time. The church bell will not be rung for hours yet. Nothing marks the time at all. The night simply goes on. You are not going far. The bakehouse is not in the house. It is a separate building at the back, across a small yard, because putting an oven inside a timber-framed house is the kind of decision a town only allows once. So you cross the yard, 6 paces, on packed earth that has frozen hard, and rings very slightly under the shoe. The bakehouse door is heavy, and it drags on the ground on one side, and you know exactly how much to lift it by the handle so that it does not. You lift. It swings. You go in. And it is warm. Not hot. The oven has been cold since yesterday afternoon. But the building is thick and low, and it has held on to something, and after the yard it feels like putting your face near a candle. The air in here is close and dry, and full of that smell again, stronger now, concentrated by the walls. You leave the door open a hand's width for the draught, and you stand in the dark and let your eyes do what they can. They can do more than you would expect. There is no light in here at all, except what comes through the gap in the door, and that is only starlight, and yet after a moment, the room begins to assemble itself out of the black. The long table down the middle, pale with the flour that has gone into the grain of it. The kneading trough against the wall, big enough to bathe a child in. The shapes of the peels leaning in the corner, 3 of them, long-handled, their blades wide and flat and worn thin at the front edge. The wood pile. The water butt. The dark, low arch of the oven mouth at the far end, which is the reason all the rest of it exists. You know where everything is. You could do most of tonight blind, and on the darkest nights of winter, you very nearly have. But you would rather see, and there is no reason not to, so you go to the shelf by the door and find the lamp by touch. It is a small clay dish of a thing with a lip, and there is a wick in it lying in old fat, and beside it in a covered pot is what you actually need. Yesterday's coal. Every bakehouse keeps one. When the fire dies at the end of the day, somebody rakes a single live ember out of it and shuts it in a covered pot with a little ash, and it sits there all night eating almost nothing, staying alive on the smallest amount of air that will keep it. You lift the lid and look in, and there it is, a dull red eye, about the size of a thumbnail, not doing anything, just persisting. You tip it out onto the hearthstone and feed it a pinch of dry straw and lean down and blow. It takes 3 breaths. On the third, the straw catches with a small dry sound, and there is light in the room for the first time. The light is orange, and it is very small, and it moves. It puts the whole bakehouse up on the walls, enormous and shaking. The table throws a shadow the length of the floor. Your own shadow goes up over the ceiling and bends. You touch the wick to it, and the lamp takes and settles into a flame the size of a fingernail, and you put the lamp on the shelf where it lives, and the room stops shaking and becomes a room again. Now the window has light in it. If anyone in the town were awake right now and looking out, they would see one orange square down at the end of the street where there was nothing a minute ago. It will be there until dawn. It is there every night. Some of them, half asleep, in the bad hours, find it a comfort without ever quite deciding to. You do not know that. You are not thinking about the window at all. You are thinking about wood. The wood pile is against the north wall, and it is stacked the way it has to be stacked, which is loosely, so that air moves through it and the wood stays dry. Wet wood is not a disaster. It is only slow, and slow is worse than most disasters in a job that has to be finished by a particular hour. What you burn is not logs. This is one of the things about the work that surprises people who have never seen it. You are not going to build a fire out of split trunk. You are going to burn bundles of brushwood, thin branches and twigs cut in the coppice woods outside the town and bound tight with a twist of withy, each bundle about as thick as your 2 arms can hold and about as long as you are tall. There is a reason for it, and the reason is that you do not want a long, slow fire. You want a very hot fire that is over quickly. Thin wood gives you that. It has an enormous amount of surface for the amount of wood in it, so it takes fast and burns fierce and turns itself into embers in a fraction of the time a log would need. A log is for a hearth where you want warmth all evening. An oven is the opposite problem. An oven wants everything at once. You count out the bundles. How many depends on the time of year and on the oven's mood. In August, 7. In the middle of winter, when the stone starts the night cold all the way through, and the wind is pulling heat out of the building faster than you can put it in, 10, and sometimes 11. Tonight is autumn, and the oven was hot yesterday and has not gone fully cold at the core, so you take 8 and you carry them across 2 at a time and drop them by the oven mouth, and the dry ends rattle on the floor. Then you open the oven. The door is not a door in any modern sense. It is a slab of oak with a rim of iron round the front of it, and it has no hinge, and it is not attached to anything. It simply fits the arch, and it stays there because it is heavy and because the arch is the right shape. You lift it out by the iron ring and lean it against the wall, and the black mouth of the oven is open in front of you. You put your hand in. Cool. Not cold. There is a very slight residual warmth in the brick at the back, the last of yesterday, and it means the stone will come up faster tonight than it would in February. Good. You take your hand out and wipe the ash off it on your apron without thinking about it, the way you have wiped it off 10,000 times, and the apron is grey down the front where all of those wipes have gone. Now you load. The oven is a dome. It is not a box. It is a low round vault of brick about the size of a large table, and it is built as a dome because a dome takes the heat up the sides and round the curve and brings it back down again onto the floor, so the whole inside cooks itself evenly. Whoever built this 100 and some years ago understood that completely and did it in brick without writing anything down. You slide the first bundle in and push it to the back with the long peel. The second goes beside it. The third across the top of the first 2. You are not stacking this carefully, but you are not stacking it carelessly either. You want air to be able to get in and go all the way through, and you want the fire to end up spread across the whole floor rather than piled in one heap in the middle, because the whole floor is what has to get hot. 8 bundles fill it more than you would expect. When you are done, the oven is packed nearly to the crown of the dome with a dense tangle of thin, dry wood, and the last one you have to lean on to get in. You take a handful of straw and a splinter of resinous kindling from the box, and you go and get fire from the lamp. And then you light it in 3 places along the front, low down, and stand back. For about 4 heartbeats, nothing happens. Then it goes. There is no gradual quality to it at all. Thin, dry brushwood in a confined stone space does not build. It arrives. The straw takes the kindling, and the kindling takes the fine twig ends, and the flame goes up into the tangle and spreads sideways along the whole front of the oven at once, with a sound like a sheet being shaken out, and then it is inside, roaring, filling the dome with orange, and the light comes out of the oven mouth and hits you in the face and throws your shadow all the way across the bakehouse and up the far wall. The noise is the thing people do not expect. It is not a crackle. A crackle is a hearth fire being polite. This is a rushing, a continuous tearing sound, with sharp reports going off inside it as the thicker sticks split, and it is loud enough that if someone spoke to you now, you would have to lean in. You take one step back from the heat, which has arrived at your face all at once, and is not pleasant at this distance. Smoke comes out of the top of the mouth in a thick, slow roll, black at first, then browning, then thinning. It goes up under the low ceiling and finds the hole at the ridge and leaves. Some of it does not, and hangs, and comes down again around the rafters, and this is why the underside of this roof is the color of a kettle bottom, and why everything you own smells the way it does. You have long since stopped being able to smell it on yourself. Other people can. Nobody mentions it, because in a town this size, the baker smelling of smoke is like the river being wet. And now the part of the night that nobody talks about begins. You wait. The oven is going to burn for something over an hour, and there is not one single thing you can do to make it go faster, and there is nothing else that can usefully be done first. The dough cannot be started until the leaven is fed, and the leaven has to be fed at the right distance from the bake. The flour is already sifted. The trough is already clean. The water is already in. So you sit down on the bench along the wall, and you watch a fire. This is a considerable part of the job. It is not an interruption of the work. It is the work in the sense that the oven has to be watched, and nobody can watch it but you, and if you fell asleep now, you would wake up in 2 hours with a cold oven and no bread, and a town that would remember it for a decade. But watching a fire is not demanding. So you sit with your back against the wall and your legs out in front of you and your hands loose, and you look into the oven, and time does what it does when you look into a fire. The colors change slowly. At the start it is all orange and moving too fast to follow. After 10 minutes the thinnest wood is already gone, and the flame is coming off the thicker sticks in a steadier way, longer and lazier, licking round the curve of the dome and back. The brick at the very top begins to go from black to a dull red, which is the thing you are actually here to see. That color, high up in the crown, is the oven telling you how it is getting on. After 20 minutes, the sound has changed. The tearing has stopped. It is a low, continuous roar now, with occasional soft collapses inside it as the burnt structure gives way and settles down into itself. The heat coming out of the mouth is steady and enormous. It reaches you on the bench, 4 paces away, as a constant pressure on the side of your face and the back of your hand. If you turn your head, the other cheek gets cold immediately, because the rest of the room is still the rest of the room. You end up half roasted and half frozen. Everyone who has ever done this ends up half roasted and half frozen. Your eyes get heavy. This is normal, and it is not dangerous yet. There is a shallow, warm, orange-colored state that a person goes into in front of an oven at 3 in the morning, in which you are not asleep and you are not really awake, and the fire keeps moving, and you keep watching it, and thoughts come in and go out without attaching to anything. You think about nothing in particular. You think about the flour a little. There is a question of whether the maslin will run out before the miller comes. You think about your hands, which are cracked across the knuckles the way they always are by this point in the year, and which will be fine again by spring. Mostly you do not think. The fire burns down. By the time it has been going the better part of an hour, there is no flame left of any height. What is in the oven now is a bed of embers spread across the floor from front to back, deep red, breathing, with small blue flames wandering over the top of it that appear and disappear and mean nothing. The brick of the dome has gone from black to red to a pale ashy grey, and that grey is what you have been waiting for all this time. Grey means the soot has burned off the inside of the dome. That is the signal. When the oven is fully hot, the black deposit left on the brick by the smoke burns away completely, and the dome goes clean and pale, and there is no more accurate instrument than that. No thermometer, no number. A color on a curved brick ceiling in the dark. You get up off the bench. Your back has stiffened, and one foot has gone to sleep, and you stand for a second and let it come back, and you look into the oven at all that quiet red heat lying there waiting. It is time to see to the leaven. There is a pot on the shelf above the trough, and it is the most important object in the building. The oven is bigger. The oven is worth more. If the oven cracked across the crown, the bakehouse would be finished until somebody could be found to rebuild it, and that could take a season. But an oven is only stone, and stone can be replaced by anyone with money and patience. What is in the pot cannot be bought. You take it down with both hands. It is a wide earthenware crock, glazed brown on the inside and rough on the outside, with a linen cloth over the top, held on with a cord. The clay is cool. You set it on the table in the lamplight, and untie the cord, and lift the cloth off. Underneath, in the bottom of the crock, is about as much dough as you could hold in 2 hands. It has risen since yesterday. It has come up into a soft dome that fills the lower third of the pot, and the surface of it is smooth and slightly wet-looking, and there are bubbles in it, some no bigger than a pinhead, and 1 or 2 the size of a pea. As you watch, one of the larger ones at the edge gives way with no sound at all and leaves a small crater. You lean over it and breathe in. It smells like apples. That is the first thing, and it surprises people the first time. Underneath the apples there is something sharper and more sour, closer to vinegar but not vinegar, and underneath that there is the plain smell of wet flour, which is a smell like a wet stone wall. All 3 of those together make a smell that exists nowhere else, and that you would know in your sleep. This is your leaven. It is a piece of yesterday's dough, kept back before yesterday's bread went into the oven, and fed since. Yesterday's was kept back from the day before. The day before that from the day before that. Nobody in this bakehouse knows how far back it goes. Your master had it from the man who taught him, and that man had it from someone else, and at some point in the chain, the story stops being told and simply becomes the pot on the shelf. It has come through this room for a very long time. It has been fed every day of that time, because if it is not fed, it dies, and if it dies, you cannot make bread until you can beg some from another town. You do not know what is in it. That is worth stopping on for a moment, because it is easy to assume that a person doing skilled work understands the mechanism of the work. You do not. Nobody does yet. It will be nearly 300 years before anyone puts a drop of this under a lens and sees the small, round living things in it, and the better part of 500 before anyone works out what they are doing in there. What you have instead is a completely accurate, practical knowledge with no explanation attached. You know that it must be fed. You know it likes to be warm and hates to be cold. You know it goes sour if it is left too long, and sluggish if it is left in a draught. You know that a spoonful of it will wake up a whole trough of flour and water and turn it into something that breathes. You do not know why, and you have never particularly needed to. There is a word for the thing that does this. The word is not yeast. The word people use in this country right now for the living froth that raises bread and ale is God is good. That is the whole word. God is good, run together into one. It is what the brewers call the balm that comes up on top of the ale while it works, and it is what gets scooped off and washed and carried down the street in a jug to bakehouses like this one when the leaven is slow or when you want a lighter loaf. They named the invisible thing that made their food rise after the only explanation they had for it, which was that somebody was being generous. You are not sentimental about it. You have used the word your whole working life without hearing it. But it is the name, and it is a fair one. And on a good morning, when the bread has come up high and even, and the crust has gone the color you wanted, it is not a bad thing to have on the tip of your tongue. Tonight, the leavened is in good condition, and you will not need to go to the brewhouse. You take a wooden spoon, worn concave on one side, and you dig out most of what is in the crock and drop it into the trough. Then, before you do anything else, before anything, you scrape the sides of the pot down and leave a piece behind. About a handful. This is the first thing an apprentice is taught, and the thing they are most likely to forget once, and once is enough. You leave the piece behind. You feed the piece. So you feed it. A double handful of flour from the bin, and enough water to make it soft, and you stir it round with the spoon until it is a thick batter, and you put the cloth back over the top and tie the cord, and set the pot back on the shelf. It will sit there all night in the warmth of the working bakehouse, and it will be up and domed and smelling of apples again by the time you leave in the morning, ready for whoever comes tomorrow night, which will probably be you. Now, water. The butt stands by the door, a barrel with the top cut off, and it is full because you filled it yesterday evening from the well in the yard, which is a matter of a bucket and a rope and about 14 trips. You do that in the evening rather than the night for 2 reasons. One is that hauling water in the dark is a good way to end up in a well. The other is better. Water left overnight in the bakehouse comes up towards the temperature of the room, and the temperature of the water is one of the few things in the whole process you can actually control. Cold water makes slow dough. In January, that can cost you an hour you do not have. Hot water kills the leaven outright, and you will not know it has happened until nothing rises and the whole night is lost. So you dip the bowl in and lift some out and put your wrist against the side of the bowl. That is the test. There is no other test. The inside of the wrist is the most honest thermometer a person carries, because it is thin-skinned and it is very near blood, and what you are looking for is water that feels like nothing at all. Not warm, not cool, absent. When you cannot feel a difference between the water and your own body, the water is where it needs to be, and every baker who has ever lived has known this, and none of them could tell you the number. Tonight it feels very slightly cool. You lift the bowl and set it near the oven mouth for a few minutes, which is what the radiant heat pouring out of that hole is for at this stage of the night, and you go and see to the flour. There are 2 bins. The big one, against the wall, is maslin. That word covers what most of this town eats. It is wheat and rye, grown together in the same field on purpose, cut together, threshed together, and ground together, so it arrives from the mill as one flour, and no one bothers to separate what was never separate. It makes a loaf that is dense and brown and a little sweet and keeps well for days, and if you ate nothing else for the rest of your life, you would be perfectly all right, which is fortunate because a great many people here eat very little else. The small bin holds wheat, sifted. That is for the better bread, and the better bread has names. The finest is pandemain, which has been put through the cloth 2 or 3 times until there is almost nothing left in it but the white heart of the grain, and it comes out pale and light, and it costs what it costs. Below that is wastel, still white, still good. Below that, a cheaper white loaf again. And a long way below all of them, at the very bottom, there is horse bread, which is made of whatever is left, bran and ground peas and beans, and which is eaten by people who have nothing, and also, exactly as the name says, by horses. The same building makes all of it. That is the part that stays with you. The pale loaf that goes up to the manor, and the dark loaf that goes to the cottages at the end of the lane, come out of the same oven on the same morning, 20 minutes apart, and the difference between a life at the top of this town and a life at the bottom of it can be measured by how many times the flour went through a piece of cloth. You are not indignant about this. It has not occurred to you to be. It is simply the arrangement, the way the river is at the bottom of the hill. You take the bolting cloth off its peg. It is a square of loose woven linen, and you stretch it over the mouth of a tub and tip flour onto it and work it through with your hand, and the fine flour goes down through the weave in a soft grey fall, and the coarse bran stays on top. That bran is not wasted either. Nothing here is wasted. It goes into the horse bread or into the pigs. The room fills very slightly with flour dust, and the lamp on the shelf picks it out, and for a minute there is a faint pale haze hanging in the air with the light going through it. You breathe some of it. Everyone who does this work breathes some of it every night for 40 years. You tip the sifted flour into the trough on top of the leaven, and you go and fetch the water. And now the night stops being preparation and becomes the thing itself. The trough is a single piece of elm, hollowed out, about the length of a man and about as deep as your forearm. It stands on 4 legs at the height of your hips, and that height was decided by somebody a long time ago who understood that the whole strength of a person's back is available at hip height, and almost none of it is available lower down. It has never been washed. It has been scraped clean 10,000 times, and it has never once been washed. And if you put your hand flat on the inside of it, the wood is smooth and faintly greasy and slightly sweet-smelling, and it is not clean in any modern sense at all, and this is not an accident. There is a whole population living in the grain of that elm, the same population that is in the pot on the shelf, and it has been living there since before your master was born. The trough helps the dough. Nobody knows that. Everybody knows that. You tip in the water. The flour goes dark where it lands. You put both hands in and start bringing the dry into the wet from the outside towards the middle, and for the first minute or so, what you have is not dough at all, but a wet mess with lumps in it, sticky in the worst way, coming away on your fingers in long strings and refusing to hold together. This is the ugliest the bread will ever look. It is also the point at which the least skill is required. You simply mix roughly until the flour is wet and the leaven is spread through it, and there is nothing dry left in the corners of the trough. Then you add the salt. Not much. Salt has to come a long way to get here, and it costs accordingly, and you use a small amount measured in the palm of your hand, and it goes in now rather than earlier, because salt put straight onto the leaven slows it down. That is another thing you know without knowing why. And then you begin, and this is the part of the night that will take the longest and require the least thought, and it is the part you will remember least of when the night is over. You push the heel of your right hand into the mass and drive it away from you along the bottom of the trough. You fold the far edge back over towards yourself. You turn the whole thing a quarter round. You push again. That is all. That is the entire technique, and it will now be repeated somewhere between 400 and 600 times. At the start it fights you. The dough is slack and tacky, and it wants to stay stuck to the trough and to your hands and to itself, and every push has to be forced, and the fold does not fold cleanly but tears. Your hands are wearing gloves of it. This is the worst stretch, and it lasts perhaps 3 minutes. Then something starts to change. It is gradual enough that you cannot point at the moment it happens. The dough begins to come away from the wood. Where before it smeared, now it releases, and the surface of it stops looking wet and starts looking matte, and the tearing stops. Push. Fold. Turn. Push. The mass has begun to hold itself together, and instead of shoving a puddle around a trough, you are now working an object. Your hands come clean. That is the sign that always feels like a small piece of luck, even though it happens every single time. The dough takes back the flour and water it was carrying on your skin and lets your fingers go, and by 4 or 5 minutes in, your hands are simply hands again, floury but not coated, and from here to the end, the dough will not stick to you. Push. Fold. Turn. Your shoulders have warmed up. There is a line of warmth across the top of your back and down the outsides of both upper arms, and it is comfortable, and it is the first time tonight you have been warm anywhere except the side of your face that was pointed at the fire. Push. Fold. Turn. The rhythm settles at something a little slower than a walking pace. You are not hurrying. There is no way to hurry this. If you go faster, you tire before the dough is ready, and then you have to stop, and stopping is worse than going slowly. So you find the speed you can hold for a long time, and you hold it. The sounds are the same sounds every night, in the same order, over and over. There is the soft, heavy slap of the dough coming down on the elm. There is a low creak from the trough legs on the push, always the same leg, always the same note. There is the small, dry sound of your palm dragging on the wood at the end of the stroke. And there is your own breathing, which has settled into the work without being asked to, out on the push and in on the fold, so that after a while you are not so much kneading as breathing, and the dough is coming along with it. Push, fold, turn. Somewhere in here you stop being present. It is not sleep, and it is not thought. It is the state a body goes into when it is doing something it has done 10,000 times, in which the work continues at full competence without any supervision at all, and the part of you that would normally be watching simply wanders off. You come back to yourself now and then, briefly, aware that some minutes have passed and that the dough has moved on without you, and then you go again. The fire in the oven behind you has stopped roaring. It has come down to a soft, irregular ticking and settling, and it makes a warm flickering on the wall in front of you that moves in a way that has nothing to do with your rhythm. And the two things going at once, the steady one in your arms and the unsteady one on the wall, is a large part of why this hour goes the way it does. Push, fold, turn. The dough changes again, and this time the change is the one you are waiting for. It becomes elastic, not soft, not stiff. When you push it now, it pushes back, and when you stretch a piece between your fingers, it goes thin without tearing, and then pulls itself back into shape when you let go. The surface has gone smooth and slightly domed, and has a faint sheen on it, like the inside of a shell. It has stopped being a mixture and become a single thing with a will of its own. You could not tell anyone how you know this has happened. You have never been shown a test for it. Your hands simply report that the dough is finished, and they have never once been wrong. And if somebody asked you to explain it, you would say that it feels right, and that would be both completely useless and entirely accurate. You stop. Your arms are heavy and warm, and there is a good ache across the back of your shoulders, the kind that means work rather than damage. You wipe your forehead on your upper sleeve because your hands are floury, and you notice that you are slightly out of breath, and you cannot say how long you have been at it. A long time. Not as long as it will seem tomorrow when you try to remember it. Now the dough has to rest and rise, and you have to help it as little as possible. You scrape it out into a heap on the floured end of the table, and you cut it with a blade into pieces, and you weigh them roughly by hand. You have been doing this long enough that your hand is a reasonable set of scales. You will check them properly later, and you will check them again after they come out of the oven, and there is a whole chapter of the night waiting for you on the subject of weight. Not yet. You round each piece by cupping your palm over it and dragging it in a small circle on the wood, which tightens the outside of it into a smooth skin in about 2 seconds and looks like nothing at all when someone who knows how does it. 17 pieces of muslin, 9 of the white. You lay them out on the table with a hand's width between them, and you spread a linen cloth over the whole lot, and you take the cloth right down at the edges so there is no draught getting under it. A cold draught across a rising loaf will flatten one side of it, and you will not find out until it is baked. And then it is out of your hands for a while. Under that cloth, in the dark, 26 pieces of dough begin very slowly to swell, and the thing that is doing it has no name yet, except a piece of a sentence about God being good, and it will work at the same patient speed, whether you watch it or not. You do not watch it. You turn round and look at the oven, which has been getting on with its own business behind your back for the better part of an hour, and which is now exactly where you need it to be. There is no flame left. What is in the oven now is a long, low bed of embers lying across the whole floor from the mouth to the back wall, and it is a deeper red than anything else you will see tonight, and it moves. Not with flame, it breathes. The color comes up and fades and comes up again in slow patches as air finds its way through, and here and there a small blue tongue appears an inch above the surface, wanders, and goes out. Above it, the dome is pale. That is what you came to see. The brick has gone from black to dull red to a light ashy grey all the way up over the crown, and the grey means the soot that the smoke laid down on the inside has burned itself completely off the brick. An oven that has not reached temperature keeps its black. An oven at temperature cleans its own ceiling. There is no dial anywhere in this town, and there does not need to be, because the oven tells you in a color that you can read across the room. So now you empty it, and you do it quickly, because from this moment on the oven is losing heat, and everything that happens next is a race that you will win comfortably as long as you do not stop to think. You take the rake off the wall. It is a flat iron blade at the end of a shaft as long as the oven is deep, and the shaft is scorched black for the last third of its length and worn pale where your hands go. You reach into the back wall and pull. The embers come towards you in a slow avalanche, and the heat comes with them. This is the hottest moment of the night by a wide margin. Up until now, the oven has been radiating out of its mouth, which is bad enough. Now you are dragging its contents across the floor towards your own feet, and the air above the rake is doing something you can see, a shimmer that bends the far wall of the oven, and you have to turn your face away and work with your head half averted and your eyes half shut. You can feel it on the backs of your hands. You can feel it through your apron on your thighs. The hair on your forearms has been getting shorter for years. The embers come out over the lip and drop into the iron trough set on the floor below, and they land in a soft rush with a sound like gravel being poured, and a small storm of sparks goes up and dies before it reaches the ceiling. 3 pulls, 4. Then you go along the corners with the edge of the rake, because embers left in a corner will sit there and scorch the loaf that ends up above them, and a black-bottomed loaf is one you cannot sell. Then the ash. Under the embers there is a layer of fine grey ash lying on the brick, and it has to come out too. You change tools. What you want now is the scuffle, and a scuffle is one of the plainest objects ever made, a bundle of rag or a pad of sacking bound onto the end of a long pole, and it does one job. You dunk it in the water butt, then you put it in the oven and sweep. The noise that comes out of the oven when a wet cloth meets a floor that hot is one of the best noises in the working day. It is a hard, flat hiss, immediate, and it is followed by steam boiling out of the mouth in a fast white cloud that goes up past your face and rolls along the ceiling. For 2 or 3 seconds you cannot see anything at all. The steam smells faintly of ash and wet stone and, oddly, of clean laundry. You sweep in long strokes from the back towards you, working the pad across the whole floor, and the ash comes up in the wet and comes out on the cloth, and you go and rinse it and wring it out and do it again. Twice, usually. 3 times if the wood was dirty. Then you look in. The oven is transformed. The floor is bare brick, dark, damp for a moment, and then instantly dry again, and it is completely clean, and the whole inside of the dome is glowing very faintly with its own heat, not red, just present, the way a summer wall is present after a long afternoon. There is no fire in it. There has not been fire in it for several minutes. It does not need fire. It has several 100 pounds of hot brick and clay wrapped around a hollow space, and that is the entire point of the design, and it will hold what it has for hours and give it back slowly and evenly from every direction at once. Now you find out whether it is right. You push your sleeve up, and you put your bare arm into the oven mouth, palm down, about as far as your elbow, into the middle of that space. And you count. That is the test. That is the whole test, and it has been the whole test for as long as there have been ovens. You count steadily, out loud or in your head, and you find out how long you can leave your arm in there before you have to take it out. Not how long before it hurts. How long before you must. Too hot, and you last 2. The oven will burn the outside of every loaf black before the middle has any idea what is happening, and you have to leave the door off and let it come down and lose 15 minutes. Too cool, and you can hold your arm in there and think about your supper. Then the bread will go in and sit there and go pale and heavy and never rise properly, and it will come out low and tough, and it is not worth putting in at all. That is a worse mistake than too hot, because too hot can be waited out, and too cool cannot be fixed. You cannot put heat back into an oven with bread in it. You want the count in the middle. You want to hold your arm there and get to a number you know, and then have to withdraw it, briskly, with the skin on the inside of your forearm stinging slightly and going pink. Tonight you get exactly the number you wanted. You take your arm out and shake it, and the sting fades in a few seconds, and you allow yourself a small amount of satisfaction, which you show to nobody, because there is nobody here. Everything about this test is inexact, and everything about it works. There is no thermometer within 100 miles of this building. There will not be one for 300 years. And yet, bread comes out of this oven, correctly baked, 300 mornings a year, decade after decade, because a man in the dark put his arm in a hole and counted. You put the door back into the arch. It goes in with a dull wooden knock, and the light in the room drops immediately, because the oven mouth has been the brightest thing in here for an hour, and now it is a slab of oak. The bakehouse gets smaller. The lamp on the shelf takes over again, and the walls come in, and the shaking orange gives way to a steady yellow that barely reaches the corners. You leave the oven shut for a few minutes. This is not idleness. With the door on, the heat inside redistributes itself, floor to dome to floor, and the hot spots even out. An oven, raked out and loaded instantly, bakes unevenly. An oven, raked out and left shut for the length of a few hundred heartbeats, bakes true. So you have a few minutes with nothing to do. Again, in a warm, dark room, in the middle of the night, at the point in the work where everything is prepared and nothing has gone wrong. You go and lift a corner of the cloth on the table and look at the dough. It has come up. Every one of the 26 pieces has grown and gone slack and rounded, and where they were tight little domes an hour ago, they are now soft and wide and holding the shape of the cloth on top. You press one very gently with the pad of a finger, and the dent stays for a moment, and then fills itself in slowly, most of the way, but not all. That is exactly what you want to see. You put the cloth back down. Behind you, inside a wall of hot brick, the oven is settling into itself and getting ready. You take the cloth off the table and fold it and put it aside, and there they are, 26 risen loaves sitting in 2 loose rows, pale and soft and breathing very slowly in the lamplight. You take up the blade. Each loaf gets cut across the top. Not deep, a shallow stroke, or 2 crossed, or 3 parallel, depending on what it is and where it is going. There is a reason for this that is entirely practical. A loaf with no cut in it will burst somewhere along its side in the oven as the inside expands, and it will burst in a place you did not choose, and it will look like a mistake. A loaf with a cut in it opens where you told it to. But the cuts are also how the loaf is named. The finer white bread is marked one way and the maslin another, and any household in this town could look at a table of bread in the market and tell you what each one is without touching it. The mark on the crust is the label, and it has to be there, and it has to be honest. Marking a maslin loaf as white bread is not a mistake anyone here would make twice. You cut all 26. It takes less than 2 minutes. Then you lift the oven door out of the arch and set it against the wall, and the heat comes out at you again, but different now, softer and rounder than it was over the embers. No shimmer in the air, a broad, steady push of warmth, like standing in the doorway of a barn on the hottest afternoon of the year. You take up the peel. The peel is a shovel with a flat blade the size of a tabletop mat and a shaft the whole depth of the oven. It is made from one piece of ash, and it has been shaved down over the years, so the front edge of the blade is now not much thicker than a coin, and that thinness is the entire skill of the tool. A thick edge shoves the loaf. A thin edge slides under it. You dust the blade with a little flour. Then you take the first loaf on the flat of your hand, lay it on the peel near the front edge, walk the peel into the oven all the way to the back wall, tip the front down slightly and pull. The loaf stays. The peel comes out from under it. That is the motion, and there is nothing to it once you can do it, and it is very nearly impossible for the first 200 attempts. Too slow, and the loaf drags and folds over on itself. Too fast, and it lands crooked or slides into the loaf behind it. Hesitate in the middle, and you have put it down half on the peel and half on the brick, and then you have to go and rescue it with the tip of the blade, while the heat cooks the hair off the back of your wrist. You do not hesitate. You have not hesitated in years. Back wall first, then work forwards. The back of the oven is a little hotter than the front, and the muslin loaves are bigger and denser and need the longer, harder bake, so they go to the back and along the sides. The white bread is smaller and finer and will be done sooner, and it goes at the front where you can reach it and pull it out first without disturbing anything else. Loaf after loaf. Lay, walk, tip, pull. Lay, walk, tip, pull. The oven floor fills from the back forwards. You leave a finger's width between them because they are going to grow and you want them to touch and not merge, and where they touch, they will come out of the oven with a pale, soft seam down the side. That is the mark of a well-packed batch. 26 loaves go in perhaps 4 minutes. You put the door back into the arch. And now there is nothing to do again. And this time the nothing is different from all the other nothings tonight, because this is the one where you find out. Everything up to this point can be repaired. Slack dough can be given more time. A cool oven can be fired again. Even a badly shaped loaf can be sold at the bottom of the price. But bread in a hot oven cannot be adjusted or checked properly or helped. It is shut inside a stone box with no window, and the only things coming out of it are heat and, in a little while, information of a kind you have to learn to read. There is no clock. You know this. There is no way to time this that anyone in this room can lay a hand on. What you have instead is 3 things. The first is counting, and you have been counting since you put the door on, in the back of your mind, in a slow, unhurried way, in whatever unit you happen to count in. It is not accurate. It does not need to be. It gives you a rough floor under the whole thing so that you cannot be badly wrong. The second is the sound. If you put your ear near the oak of the door and the bakehouse is quiet, you can hear the batch. It is very faint. It is a soft, irregular crackling and ticking, and it will change over the bake, and towards the end there is a fine dry sound in it that was not there at the start, which is crust. The third is the smell, and the smell is the one that actually decides it. For the first stretch, there is almost nothing. A trace of wet flour and hot stone, no more than what the room already smells of. You sit down on the bench and lean back against the wall and let your arms hang. Then, at some point you never manage to catch, it begins. It does not come gradually. That is the thing about it that never wears out. You are sitting in a dark room in the middle of the night with your eyes half shut, and there is nothing, and then the room is full of it. Warm, sweet, faintly nutty, enormous. It arrives all at once, and it goes everywhere, into the roof timbers and the flour dust and the wool of your tunic and the back of your throat. It is the best smell that human beings have ever accidentally invented, and you get it before anyone else in the town, every single morning of your working life, alone, sitting on a bench in the dark. There is a fact about this that is worth having. That smell is not in the flour. It is not in the water, or the leaven, or the salt. It does not exist anywhere in the trough. It is manufactured in the last few minutes of the bake, in the crust, by the heat, out of things that had no smell at all, until they were put together and made hot. You are not releasing it. You are making it tonight for the first and only time. And the same thing was made in this room yesterday and will be made tomorrow, and it is never the same batch twice. You do not know any of the chemistry. You know that when the room smells like this, the bread is nearly ready, and that when the sweetness sharpens very slightly at the edge into something closer to toast, it is ready now, and that if you wait past that, you will be selling dark loaves at a discount. You wait for the sharpening. When it comes, you get up, then lift the door out and look. They have grown. The pale, soft lumps you put in have become round brown loaves standing up off the floor of the oven, and the cuts you made across the tops have opened into ragged, pale mouths where the inside pushed out. The color is even, back to front, which means you swept the floor properly and packed them right. The seams where they touched are exactly as they should be. You take the peel and bring the white bread out first, sliding it in under each loaf and lifting it clear and swinging it out onto the table. And when a loaf comes off the peel onto the wood, it does not thud. It knocks. Hollow, light, dry, like a small drum. That sound is the last check, and it is not really a check at all, because you already know. Then the muslin from the sides, then the back. They go on the rack in rows and immediately begin to make small clicking noises as the crust cools and contracts and cracks in 1,000 tiny places, and a fine mist of steam rises off the whole rack and drifts towards the roof. The bakehouse now is warm and bright and smells the way it smells, and there are 26 loaves of bread standing on a rack that did not exist an hour ago, and it is still the middle of the night. You take one of the small ones, the odd one. There is always an odd one, because you always make one more than you need to, and this is not generosity or accident, it is arithmetic, and there will be more to say about the arithmetic later. You break it open with your thumbs, and the inside comes apart in a cloud of steam. You eat it standing up, looking at nothing, and it is too hot, and you eat it anyway. The first knock comes while your mouth is still full. It is not much of a knock. It is 2 soft taps low down on the bakehouse door, made by somebody who knows that there are people asleep in the house across the yard, and who has done this several hundred times before. You open it. It is Maud, who is somewhere past 70, and who is the earliest of them, always, every day, standing in the dark in a cloak, with a wooden bowl held against her hip and a cloth over the top of it. She does not say good morning, because it is not morning. She says something that is halfway between a greeting and a grunt, and you say something similar back, and she comes in and puts the bowl on the end of the table and goes out again, and the whole transaction takes perhaps 12 seconds. Under the cloth in the bowl is a single small round of dough with a thumbprint pressed deep into the middle of it. That thumbprint is Maud's mark, and it has been Maud's mark for 50 years. This is the other half of the work, and in a town this size, it is not the smaller half. Most households here do not have an oven. An oven is a serious piece of building. It takes a great deal of fuel to bring up to heat, and it is a real hazard in a house made of timber and thatch. So the town does what towns did. It makes its bread at home, in its own bowls, with its own flour and its own leaven, kneaded on its own tables by its own hands, and then it carries the dough down the lane to the one building that already has a hot oven in it and pays a small charge to have it baked. You are not only a baker. For a good part of every morning, you are a public utility. And every single bowl that comes through that door has a mark on it, because 20 households' bread is about to go into one oven together and come out looking broadly similar, and the entire system rests on nobody ever getting the wrong loaf. The marks are not written. Most of the people bringing them could not write. The marks are shapes. Mode's thumbprint. A cross cut deep, corner to corner, which is the cooper's. 3 parallel slashes for the household at the top of the lane. A ring of small pinches all round the rim, which is the work of a girl of about 9 who was taught it by her mother and does it with tremendous care. 2 cuts and a thumbprint together. A single notch on one side. A cross with a dot in one quarter. And where the mark would not be enough, a tally comes with the bowl, which is a little strip of wood with a pattern of notches on it, one half of which stays with the bread and the other half of which goes home in a pocket, so that the two can be laid side by side at the end and matched notch for notch. Nobody designed this. It simply grew, and it works. And it works so completely that a wrong loaf is an event that people would talk about for a month. They come steadily now. The second knock, then a third a few minutes later. Alice from the brewhouse 2 doors up, who is awake at this hour anyway, because ale does not keep office hours either, and who is the one household in town whose dough you can smell coming, because she raises hers with the balm off the top of her own ale, and it arrives smelling of the brewhouse. She stays a minute longer than the others. She leans on the doorframe and says something about the price of barley, and you say something back, and neither of you is really having a conversation, and both of you are glad of it. 2 people, awake in a sleeping town, at 4 in the morning, have a small thing in common that does not need to be discussed. Then Ned, the smith's boy, who is 13, and who is barely conscious, and who carries a tub big enough for a family of 9, and sets it down with a bang that makes you look at him. He mumbles an apology at the floor and shuffles out. Then 2 more you do not see at all, because they have simply left the bowls inside the door and gone. By the time it stops, there are 19 bowls and tubs along the length of the table, and on the bench and on the floor by the wall, and the room smells of 19 different households. That is a real thing, and it is one of the strange privileges of this job. Every household's leaven is a little different, because it has been living in that particular house, eating that particular flour for years. Some are sharp. Some are mild and milky. 1 or 2 are frankly past their best, and nobody has told them. You can stand in the middle of this room before dawn and smell the difference between one end of the lane and the other. Now, the heat. The oven is no longer at bread heat. It has given a good deal of what it had to those 26 loaves, and it has been standing open and shut for a quarter of an hour, and it has come down. If you put your arm in now, you would count considerably higher than you did before. And that is not a problem. That is the design. This is the thing about a masonry oven that nobody who has not used one understands. You do not get one bake out of it. You get a sequence. The heat comes down in a long, slow curve over hours, and every stage of that curve is good for something. You have simply taken the top of the curve for yourself, for the bread that has to be right, because it is going to market with your name attached to it, and everything below it belongs to other people. So the town's dough goes in on falling heat, and falling heat suits it, because these are mostly plain dense loaves that want a long steady bake rather than a fierce one. You load them in order, and the order is not arbitrary. It is roughly the order they arrived in, which means Maud's small loaf goes to the best remaining spot at the back, which is a thing you have never mentioned to anyone and would deny if asked. Then the Coopers. Then the ones with the ring of pinches, which you put where you can keep an eye on them, because they are always slightly too wet and they always spread. 19 households bread in one oven, in the dark, with the door going on and off and the peel going in and out, and you keeping the whole arrangement in your head, where each one is, which mark is where, which came in first, and so which comes out first. Nobody wrote it down. You could not write it down. You just know it, the way you know the 7 rungs of the ladder. And when there is still heat left after all of that, and there usually is, the rest of the curve gets used up too. Somebody has sent down a dish of apples and honey with a lid of pastry over it to go in after the bread, because there is no point in a whole household firing a hearth for one dish when the bakehouse oven is going to be warm anyway. That goes into the middle heat. Further down the curve, when the oven has come to no more than the warmth of a good afternoon, other things go in. A tray of split pears to dry, a shallow pan of grain to be parched, a bowl of small hard sour crab apples that somebody wants softened. By the time this oven is finally cold, tomorrow evening, it will have cooked in one long descending line from fierce to barely warm, the bread of the market, the bread of 19 houses, one household's pudding, and a quantity of fruit. One firing, one load of brushwood, all of that. Nobody in this town thinks that is remarkable, and it is the single most efficient thing they do. You stand for a moment with the peel in your hand in a room full of other people's bread, and the window behind you is not quite as black as it was. On the shelf under the window there is a balance. It is a simple one. A beam, a pivot, 2 shallow brass pans on chains, and beside it a small wooden box with a sliding lid. In the box are the weights, and the weights are the reason the box has a lid, because they are the only objects in this building that anybody would bother to steal. You take the market bread off the rack now that it has cooled enough to handle properly, and you begin to weigh it. Loaf on one pan, weight on the other. Watch the beam. This is the part of the night that people find strangest when it is explained to them, and the strangeness is not the weighing. It is what the weighing is for. The price of a loaf of bread in this country does not change. That is the whole thing in one sentence, and it takes a moment to land. A loaf costs a farthing, or it costs a halfpenny, and it has cost that for as long as anyone can remember, and it will go on costing that. The number does not move. There is no haggling over it in the market. Nobody arrives at the stall and asks what bread is today, because bread is what bread has always been. What moves is the loaf. When the harvest has been good and grain is cheap, the farthing loaf gets bigger. When the harvest has failed and grain is dear, the farthing loaf gets smaller, and it goes on getting smaller through the winter as the price climbs, and in a genuinely bad year, it gets very small indeed. The coin stays the same, and the bread shrinks in your hand. There is a law about it. It came in a little over 100 years before tonight, in the reign of the third King Henry, and it sets out in careful detail how heavy a loaf of each kind must be at every level of the price of wheat, and it covers ale in the same breath, which is why Alice at the brewhouse is bound by the same rules you are. It has been in force your whole life and your master's whole life. It will still be in force, with adjustments, 600 years from now. So the weight is not a matter of pride. It is the law, and the law is a table, and the table changes with the market, and this month it says what it says. You know the number for this month because your master came back from market with it and told you, and you have been making bread to it for 3 weeks. And this is where the arithmetic comes in. Weigh a loaf going into the oven and weigh it coming out, and it will have lost. It loses water steadily all through the bake. A loaf that went in at the right weight comes out under it every time, without exception, and the amount it loses depends on how long it was in, and how hot and how wet the dough was, and how big the loaf is, and none of those things is precisely the same from one night to the next. Which means you cannot make a loaf that is exactly right. Nobody can. The variables do not permit it. So you make it heavier than it needs to be. You aim over. You take the number the law asks for, and you go past it deliberately by a comfortable margin, and then when the loaf comes out and has lost what it was going to lose, it is still on the correct side of the line. And because the margin has to be comfortable rather than tight, the flour that goes into a night's baking always makes slightly more bread than the count you actually need. Which is why there is an odd loaf. Not out of kindness, and not out of any of the stories that get told about it later. Out of the plain fact that you cannot hit a moving target exactly, and so you aim past it. Every night, the surplus is real bread and has to go somewhere. It goes to the odd loaf, and the odd loaf goes to whoever is standing in the bakehouse at 4 in the morning, which is you. You go along the rack. Loaf, weight, beam. Loaf, weight, beam. The beam tips your way each time by a little, not by much. A wildly overweight loaf is its own kind of failure, because you have given away flour that belonged to your master, and flour is the whole cost of the business. What you want is over by a hair, over by the smallest amount that is reliably over. Every one of them clears. You expected them to. You have been doing this long enough that your hand set the size correctly without the balance, and the balance is really only there to confirm what you already believe. But you check every loaf anyway, one at a time, at 4 in the morning, in a cold room, with nobody watching. There is an inspector. He comes round with the constable perhaps once a month, unannounced, and weighs bread at the stall in the market, and he has never yet found anything wrong with yours. There are penalties for the ones he does find something wrong with, and they are not gentle, and everybody knows what they are, and it is not necessary to dwell on them because they are not what makes you careful. What makes you careful is smaller and much closer to hand. It is that Maud is going to buy a loaf on Friday. Maud has a fixed amount of money, and it does not change with the harvest either, and when the loaf gets smaller, she does not eat less bread by choice. She eats less bread, and the difference between a loaf that clears the weight by a hair and a loaf that is a little under is, in her particular week, an actual quantity of food. She will never know. She could not weigh it if she wanted to. She will take the loaf and put it in her bowl and carry it up the lane, and it will not occur to her to check. And the reason it will not occur to her is that in her whole long life, the bread from this building has never once been short. That is not a small thing to be. 400 people have organized their sleep around it. You put the last loaf on the rack and slide the lid back over the box of weights. Behind you, the window has gone from black to the very dark blue that comes before grey. The light does not arrive. It leaks. There is no moment you could point to. You look up from the balance, and the window is dark blue instead of black. You turn round to see to the oven, and when you look back, it is grey. Somewhere in between, without any announcement, the night stopped. The oven is well down now. Not cold. It will not be cold until this evening. But it has come a long way down its curve, and the last things are in it. The pears and the pan of grain, sitting in a warmth that would no longer bake anything and is perfect for drying. You do not need to watch them. They will take as long as they take. So you do the last of the tidying, which is the part of any night's work that gets done worst, and you know it, and you do it anyway. You scrape the trough down with the flat blade and leave it as clean as it will ever be, which is not clean. You sweep the floor from the far end towards the door, and the flour and ash and small dry crumbs of dough go out over the threshold into the yard. You stack the peels back in their corner. You wipe the balance pans. You look at the pot on the shelf to check that you fed it, and you fed it, and you knew you had. Outside, the town is starting. It starts the way the light did, in no order, and with no signal. A shutter goes somewhere up the lane. A bucket handle rings against the side of a bucket. Somebody coughs, twice, indoors. A dog that has been asleep in a doorway all night stands up, shakes itself with a jingle of nothing at all, and walks off with great purpose towards the market square. Then the smoke. One by one, all over the town, the banked fires are being opened. Somebody kneels at a hearth and rakes the ash off the top of the embers that have been sitting under there since last night, and finds them still alive, and lays on a handful of straw and blows, and the whole thing comes back. In a house across the yard, then in a house behind that, then everywhere. The fires that all went under together at the end of yesterday come up again together at the start of today, and the smoke starts to stand up out of the roofs in thin blue columns in the grey light, and the town smells for a quarter of an hour of 100 small fires being born. You watch some of it from the doorway with your arms folded. You are extremely tired now. It has been arriving for the last hour, in a way that is not unpleasant, a heaviness that has got into your legs and behind your eyes, and made your own movements feel slightly delayed, as though your hands are being operated from a short distance away. The bakehouse behind you is warm and full of bread. They come for it. The same people, in roughly the same order, awake this time. Maud first, again, in the same cloak, and now she does say good morning, and she takes her bowl with her small loaf in it, the thumbprint burned dark in the middle of the crust, and she puts her hand flat on the top of it for a second before she covers it up, because it is warm and her hands are old. Then the Cooper's household. Then the tally halves, being laid side by side, notch to notch, and matched. Then Ned again, awake now and talkative, carrying the enormous tub back with both arms round it and his chin on top. Alice takes hers and says the thing about barley again and goes, 19 bowls leave the building over the course of half an hour, and the room empties out, and the table is bare, except for the market bread, which is not yours to deal with. The master comes down. He is dressed, and he has washed his face, and he looks like a man who has slept, which he has. He stands in the middle of the bakehouse and does what he does every morning, which is to look at the rack and pick up one loaf and turn it over and look at the bottom of it and put it down. He does not say anything about it. He has not said anything about it in 2 years. The not saying is the compliment, and you took a long time to work that out. He asks whether the miller came. You tell him not yet. He makes a noise about the miller and starts loading the bread into the 2 big flat baskets for the market, and that is the handover, and it is complete, and the night is now formally over. You go out across the yard. The earth that rang under your shoe on the way over has softened. There is a thin grey light on everything, and the sky above the church tower is the colour of the inside of a shell. It is going to be a clear day, and cold, and you will not see any of it. At the house door, you stop for a second, because you can smell your own bakehouse from here, the way the whole street can, the way it always does at this hour. Somebody 2 doors up is opening a shutter and getting it in their face and thinking nothing of it. That smell is simply what this end of the town smells like in the morning. It has smelled like this every morning since before any of them were born. You go in and you go up the ladder, 7 rungs, backwards, without looking. The room is empty. The others are up and gone. Your mattress is where you left it, flatter than it should be, with the blanket thrown back exactly the way you threw it, back in the dark, however many hours ago that was. You take off your shoes. You do not take off anything else. Nobody does. You lie down and pull the wall up, and the straw takes your shape and gives off that dry hay smell, and the flattened place near your hip finds your hip, and you lie in it and do not move. Underneath you, through the boards, you can hear the day starting, the scrape of the baskets going out, the master's voice in the yard, then further off, a cart somewhere on the lane, the general low sound of 400 people getting up and beginning, which you have been listening to from this exact position, from the wrong side of it, every morning for years. They are going to eat bread today, most of them, and most of them will not think about it, and that is right. Your arms ache pleasantly across the shoulders. There is still a little flour in the creases of your knuckles, and you can smell it, faintly, from where your hand is lying near your face. The light in the room is grey and getting stronger, and you turn your face away from the window. Somewhere below, the bakehouse door is opened, and somebody says something to somebody else, and neither of them is talking to you. The straw settles. Your feet are cold. You have stopped noticing.